Sarah Matthews stared at the certified letter in her trembling hands, reading the words for the third time. Her grandmother, Eleanor Matthews, had passed away at the age of 93, and Sarah, whom she'd never met, was the sole heir to her estate. The property was located outside of Wickham, Iowa, a town so small it didn't appear on most maps. It was October 2019, and Sarah was 28 years old, working a dead-end job at a marketing firm in Chicago, barely making rent on her studio apartment. The timing seemed almost too perfect. The letter from the estate attorney, Mr. Harold Finch, requested her presence at the property to sign the necessary documents and take possession. Sarah had grown up in foster care. Her mother had died when she was 3, and she'd never known her father. The social workers had told her she had no living relatives. Now, apparently, that had been wrong. The drive from Chicago to Wickham took 6 hours, the last 2 on increasingly narrow roads that cut through endless cornfields. It was late afternoon when Sarah's GPS finally announced she'd arrived at her destination, though there was nothing to see but a gravel driveway disappearing between walls of dried corn stalks, brown and rustling in the October wind. The driveway was at least a quarter-mile long. As Sarah's Honda Civic bumped along the rutted path, the corn seemed to press in on both sides, creating a tunnel that blocked out the fading sunlight. She felt a flutter of unease in her stomach, the same feeling she'd had as a child when the lights went out in the group home. Then the farmhouse appeared. It was a 2-story structure that might have been white once, but had faded to the color of old bones. A wraparound porch sagged on one side, and several shutters hung at odd angles. To the left stood a massive barn, its red paint peeling away in long strips. Behind everything, the cornfield stretched to the horizon, an ocean of dried stalks swaying in unison like something breathing. A black Lincoln town car was parked in front of the house. As Sarah pulled up beside it, a man in his 60s emerged, wearing a suit that seemed out of place in the rural setting. "Miss Matthews," he called out. "Harold Finch. We spoke on the phone." Sarah got out of her car, stretching her stiff muscles. The air smelled different here, earth and vegetation and something else, something faintly sweet and rotten that she couldn't identify. "Thank you for meeting me here, Mr. Finch," she said, shaking his hand. His palm was soft and damp. "Please, call me Harold." He glanced at the farmhouse, and Sarah noticed something flicker across his face. Was it nervousness? "Shall we go inside? I have the papers ready for you to sign, and then I'll give you the keys and be on my way. I'd like to make it back to Cedar Rapids before dark." "You're not from Wickham?" Sarah asked. "Des Moines, actually. Your grandmother, well, she had difficulty finding local representation." He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Shall we?" The front steps creaked alarmingly under their weight. Harold produced a keyring and unlocked the door, which opened with a sound like a sigh. The interior smelled of dust and age and that same sweet rotten odor from outside, stronger now. Sarah's eyes adjusted to the gloom. They were standing in a parlor filled with antique furniture, covered in white sheets, like ghosts frozen in mid-haunting. A staircase climbed into darkness on the left. Harold moved quickly to the dining room table, already set up with documents. "This is straightforward. The property, all its contents, and a small savings account, roughly $30,000, all transfer to you. Sign here, here, and here." As Sarah read through the papers, she asked, "What can you tell me about my grandmother? Why didn't I know about her?" Harold shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Matthews was very private. According to my notes, she had a falling out with your mother many years ago, before you were born. After your mother's death, she made inquiries through social services, but—" He trailed off. "But what?" "I don't know the details, Miss Matthews. I only handled her estate planning, and that was just in the last few years. I met her perhaps 3 times, always in town, never—" He glanced around the room. "Never here?" "Why not?" "She preferred it that way." His tone made it clear he wouldn't elaborate. Sarah signed the documents. Harold witnessed them, then handed her a keyring with 5 keys of various sizes and ages. "The smallest is for the front door. I'm afraid I don't know what the others are for, sheds perhaps, or rooms in the house. Everything is yours now." He packed up his briefcase with obvious haste. "There's a generator out back if the power is out, which it likely is. The well water should still be good. The nearest grocery store is in Wickham, about 12 miles back the way you came. You're leaving?" Now? Sarah felt a sudden spike of panic at the thought of being alone here. I'm afraid I must. Caught in the morning. He was already moving toward the door. Good luck, Miss Matthews. If you need anything, the office number is on my card. She followed him out onto the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky the color of a bruise. Harold practically ran to his car. Wait, Sarah called. Is there something I should know about this place? Harold paused with his car door open. For a long moment, he seemed to debate with himself. Finally, he said, Your grandmother lived here alone for over 50 years. People in town, they had stories. But stories are all they are, Miss Matthews. Just stories. What kind of stories? But Harold was already in his car, the engine starting. He pulled away quickly, gravel spraying from his tires, and then Sarah was alone. The farmhouse felt different without Harold's presence. Larger somehow, and quieter, though not truly quiet. Sarah could hear the house settling, boards creaking, and outside the constant whisper of the corn. She retrieved her overnight bag from her car and found a bedroom on the second floor that seemed less dusty than the others. It had been prepared recently. The bed was made with fresh linens, and there was even a vase of dead flowers on the nightstand, brown and crispy. Had her grandmother known she was dying? Had she prepared this room for Sarah? The electricity was indeed out. Sarah found candles and oil lamps throughout the house, along with matches, as if her grandmother had lived without power regularly. In the kitchen, she discovered a pantry stocked with canned goods, some dating back years. As darkness fell completely, Sarah lit several candles and lamps. The flickering light made the sheet-covered furniture cast strange shadows on the walls. She tried her cell phone. No signal, of course. She was completely isolated. She made herself a cold dinner from canned goods and explored the first floor. The living room, a library filled with old books, a sitting room, the kitchen, and a door that she assumed led to the basement, though it was locked and none of the keys seemed to fit. In the library, Sarah found photo albums. She carried one to the dining room table and began looking through it by lamplight. The photographs were old, some dating back to the 1940s. She saw a young woman she assumed was her grandmother. Pretty, with dark hair and a serious expression. There were pictures of the farmhouse when it was new and well-maintained, the barn painted bright red, the cornfields green and lush. But as she progressed through the album, she noticed something odd. In many of the photos, especially those taken of the cornfield, there appeared to be a figure in the distance. It was always too far away or too blurry to make out clearly, just a dark shape among the corn stalks. At first, Sarah thought it might be a scarecrow, but the figure appeared in different locations in different photos. And in some images, it seemed to be closer to the camera than in others, as if it were approaching the house over time. In the last photo in the album, dated 1968, Eleanor Matthews stood on the front porch. But she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking to the left, toward the cornfield, and her expression was one of absolute terror. After that, there were no more photos. Sarah closed the album, feeling chilled. Outside, the wind had picked up, and the corn rustled loudly, sounding almost like whispered words. She decided to go to bed. Upstairs, she changed into her pajamas and climbed under the covers. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, but sleep wouldn't come. The house was too noisy. Constant creaking and settling, and once what sounded like footsteps in the hallway outside her door. Sarah sat up, heart pounding. "Hello," she called out. Nothing. She got up and checked the hallway. Empty. The other bedroom doors stood open, revealing dark rooms filled with more sheet-covered furniture. At the end of the hall was a window overlooking the backyard and the cornfield beyond. Sarah walked to the window and looked out. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the corn. The stalks swayed in the wind, creating patterns that were almost hypnotic. Sarah watched for several minutes, her eyes growing heavy, when suddenly she saw it. A figure standing in the corn. It was about 50 yards from the house, barely visible among the stalks. It appeared to be person-shaped but utterly still, not swaying with the wind. Sarah blinked, trying to focus. It was probably just a trick of the light, shadows forming a human shape. But then it moved. It didn't walk. It simply appeared 5 yards closer, as if it had teleported. Sarah gasped and stepped back from the window. Her rational mind tried to explain it away. her eyes playing tricks. She was tired, unfamiliar surroundings causing stress. She forced herself to look again. The figure was still there, and even closer now. She could make out more details. It was tall, impossibly tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet. And it was dark, not like a person wearing dark clothing, but dark like an absence, a void in the shape of a human. As Sarah watched in frozen horror, it moved again, appearing at the edge of the cornfield, right where the backyard began. Now she could see that it had no face, just a smooth, dark surface where a face should be. And it was looking directly at her window. Sarah stumbled backward, her legs hitting a small table and nearly sending her sprawling. She ran back to her bedroom and slammed the door, suddenly feeling foolish. There was no lock on the door. In fact, she realized she hadn't seen locks on any of the interior doors. She pushed the dresser in front of the door. It was heavy, but fear gave her strength. Then she sat on the bed, breathing hard, listening. For a long time, there was nothing but the usual creaks and the wind in the corn. Sarah began to calm down. She'd imagined it, obviously. Stress, fatigue, the creepy old house, Harold's cryptic warnings. It had all combined to make her see things. Then she heard the back door open downstairs. It was distinctive, the same sigh-like sound the front door had made. Sarah stopped breathing, listening with every fiber of her being. Footsteps on the first floor, slow, heavy, deliberate. They moved through the kitchen, into the dining room, the parlor. They were searching room by room. Then they started up the stairs. Each step creaked under tremendous weight. Sarah looked around desperately for a weapon, anything. She grabbed a heavy candlestick from the nightstand. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs. They paused, then started down the hallway, approaching her door. They stopped right outside. Sarah could hear breathing now, wet, raspy, like air moving through a congested throat. She raised the candlestick, ready to fight for her life. The doorknob rattled. The door pushed against the dresser. Something on the other side made a sound, not quite a word, more like a moan or a groan. Then suddenly it stopped. The breathing ceased. Sarah waited, muscles aching from tension, but there was nothing more. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, she crept to the door and pressed her ear against it. Silence. She didn't move the dresser. She didn't open the door. She went back to the bed and sat there, candlestick in hand, until the first light of dawn crept through the window. Sarah left the house as soon as it was properly light out, not even bothering to eat breakfast. She needed to be around people, needed to convince herself that the world was still normal. The drive to Wickham took 20 minutes. The town was barely more than a main street. A grain elevator, a gas station, a combination diner and grocery store, a church, and a handful of houses. Sarah parked in front of the diner and went inside. It was the kind of place where conversation stopped when a stranger entered. 6 people were scattered among the booths, farmers mostly, based on their clothes, and all of them turned to look at Sarah. A woman in her 50s behind the counter raised her eyebrows. "Help you, hun?" "Coffee, please," Sarah said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "And breakfast, whatever you recommend." As the waitress poured coffee, she studied Sarah's face. "You're not from around here?" "Chicago, I'm just visiting." Sarah wasn't sure why she didn't mention the farmhouse. The waitress called back to the kitchen. "Order of the usual, Jack." Then to Sarah, "I'm Linda. That's my husband cooking. We own the place." "Sarah, nice to meet you." Linda leaned on the counter, clearly curious but too polite to pry. The other conversations in the diner had resumed, but Sarah sensed they were still listening. She decided to take a chance. "Actually, I inherited some property around here. The Matthews farmhouse." The change was immediate. Linda's friendly expression froze. Behind Sarah, the conversation stopped again. The only sound was the sizzle of bacon on the griddle in the back. "The Matthews place," Linda said slowly. "Eleanor's place. She was my grandmother." Was she now? Linda's tone was unreadable. "Never knew Eleanor had family. We were estranged. I never met her." Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm coffee mug. "What can you tell me about her?" Linda exchanged glances with an older man in a booth by the window. He gave a slight shake of his head. "Not much to tell," Linda said, her earlier warmth gone. She kept to herself, came to town once a month for supplies, paid in cash, didn't make conversation. How long had she lived there? All her life, far as I know. She inherited the place from her parents back in the 60s. Jack emerged from the kitchen with a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast. He was a large man with a weathered face and careful eyes. He set the plate down in front of Sarah. "You staying out there?" he asked. "At the farmhouse?" "I'm thinking about it. I need to assess the property, decide whether to keep it or sell it." Jack and Linda exchanged another look. "Might be best to sell," Jack said. "That's a lot of land for one person to manage." "What about the corn?" Sarah asked. "Is someone farming it?" "No one's farmed that land in decades," the old man by the window spoke up. His voice was rough like gravel. "Corn grows wild there now, has for 50 years, maybe more." Sarah frowned. "But it looked healthy. I mean, it's fall, so it's dried out, but it looked like it had been planted in rows." "Corn remembers," the old man said cryptically. "Keeps growing in the same pattern year after year." "Roy, that's enough," Linda said sharply, but Roy wasn't done. "You should leave that place, young lady. Sell it to some developer who'll tear it all down, plow under that damned corn, and build something new. That's what should have happened years ago." "What do you mean?" Sarah pressed. "What's wrong with the farmhouse?" The diner fell silent. Linda busied herself wiping down the already clean counter. Jack retreated to the kitchen. The other patrons suddenly became very interested in their food. Only Roy kept looking at her, his rheumy eyes intense. "You notice anything strange yet?" Sarah thought about the figure in the cornfield, the footsteps in the house. "Like what?" "Things that don't move right, things that shouldn't be there." Roy leaned forward. "The Matthews place has been cursed since 1952. That's when it started." "Roy," Linda's voice was sharp. "Don't fill her head with nonsense." "It ain't nonsense, Linda, and you know it. How many people have we lost to that damned farm over the years?" "Those were accidents, drownings, heart attacks, all people who went onto that property." Roy turned back to Sarah. "Your grandmother, she made a bargain long time ago, kept that thing fed, kept it satisfied, and it left the town alone. But now she's gone, and you're there. And I'm guessing you don't know the first thing about maintaining the arrangement." "What arrangement? What are you talking about?" But Roy shook his head and turned back to his coffee. "I've said enough. Already said too much, probably. You want my advice? Take what you can carry from that house and leave. Don't spend another night there." Sarah tried to ask more questions, but Roy refused to speak, and no one else would meet her eyes. She finished her breakfast in uncomfortable silence and paid. As she was leaving, Linda caught her arm. "Listen, hon," she said quietly. "Roy's a superstitious old man, but he's not entirely wrong. Strange things have happened around that property. If you insist on staying, be careful, lock your doors at night, and whatever you do, don't go into the cornfield after dark." "Why? What's in the cornfield?" But Linda just shook her head and went back to wiping the counter. Sarah drove back to the farmhouse, her mind churning. Every rational bone in her body told her that the people in town were just small-minded and superstitious. Rural legends, the kind that grew in isolated communities. There was no such thing as curses or things in cornfields. But she couldn't forget what she'd seen last night. The figure, the footsteps. She parked in front of the farmhouse and sat in her car for a long moment, gathering courage. In the daylight, the place looked less sinister, just old and run down. The corn swayed gently in the breeze, golden and ordinary. Sarah forced herself to get out of the car. She would spend a few hours going through the house, gathering anything valuable, and then she would leave. She'd arrange for an estate sale from Chicago, sell the property site unseen to whoever would buy it. And forget this place existed. Inside, the house was exactly as she'd left it, the dresser still pushed against the bedroom door upstairs. Sarah moved through the first floor systematically, looking for anything worth taking. Jewelry, documents, cash. In the library, she found more photo albums and a journal. The journal entries were sparse and cryptic, starting in 1952. June 15th, 1952. "It came last night. Father tried to fight it. They found him in the corn this morning. Mother won't stop screaming. June 20th, 1952. Mother is gone too. It took her. I am alone now. Reverend Marsh says I must leave, but where would I go? This is my home, June 30th, 1952. The Reverend came to perform an exorcism. It didn't work. The Reverend is gone. I am alone with it now, July 10th, 1952. I have learned what it wants. There must be a keeper. There must be a feeding. This is the price for the land, for the corn, for everything. I will be the keeper. What choice do I have? After that, the entries became monthly notations, just dates and check marks, continuing for decades. The last entry was from September 2019, a month before Eleanor's death, September 15th, 2019. I am dying. The cancer has spread too far. I have tried to find another keeper, but there is no one, only Sarah, my granddaughter, whom I have never met. I have left her everything in the hope that she will understand, that she will continue. But I fear for her. I fear what will happen when I am gone and the feedings stop. Forgive me, Sarah. I had no other choice. Sarah's hands trembled as she closed the journal. Feedings? What the hell had her grandmother been doing here? She remembered the locked basement door. None of the keys on the ring had fit, but there had to be a way in. Sarah went to the kitchen and examined the door more carefully. It wasn't locked with a keyed lock. There was a deadbolt, but it was on the outside. Someone had added it to keep something in, or to keep people out. Sarah slid the bolt and opened the door. A wooden staircase descended into darkness. The smell that wafted up was overpowering. Sweet rot, like meat left too long in the sun, mixed with earth and something else, something chemical. Sarah gagged and pulled her shirt up over her nose. She found a flashlight in the kitchen drawer and shone it down the stairs. The beam illuminated rough wooden steps descending about 12 feet. She could see a concrete floor at the bottom and what looked like shelves along the walls. Every instinct screamed at her to close the door and leave, but she had to know. She had to understand what her grandmother had been involved in. Sarah descended the steps slowly, the flashlight beam bouncing with each step. The smell got worse. At the bottom, she swept the flashlight around the basement. It was larger than she expected, running the full length of the house. The walls were lined with shelves, and on those shelves were jars, hundreds of them. The flashlight beam glinted off glass and liquid, and things floating inside. Sarah moved closer, her stomach churning. The nearest jar contained what looked like a small animal. A rabbit, maybe, or a cat preserved in some kind of fluid. The next jar held a larger animal. A dog, she thought, though it was hard to tell. Its eyes were still open, staring. Further down, the jars got bigger. Sarah's flashlight found one that was at least 2 feet tall. Inside, suspended in cloudy liquid, was something that might have once been human. A baby, she realized with horror. An infant preserved in formaldehyde or something similar. She stumbled backward, her back hitting the opposite wall. The flashlight beam swung wildly, illuminating more horrors. The jars contained a grotesque collection. Animals of all sizes, human fetuses at various stages of development, and things she couldn't identify. Twisted shapes that didn't seem to belong to any species she knew. At the far end of the basement was a workbench. On it were more jars, these ones empty and ready. There were also tools, surgical instruments, syringes, and a leather-bound book. Sarah forced herself to approach. She opened the book. It was a ledger of sorts, with dates and descriptions. June 1952. Dog, shepherd mix. July 1952. Calf, stillborn. August 1952. Piglet, 3 of them. September 1952. Human fetus, miscarriage, 4 months. The entries continued for decades, monthly offerings recorded in Eleanor's careful handwriting. The subjects varied. Sometimes animals from the farm or found in the woods, sometimes things that had died naturally, sometimes things that... Sarah's stomach turned as she realized that some entries mentioned acquiring specimens from the hospital in Cedar Rapids, from the veterinary clinic, even from funeral homes. The last entry was from September 2019, September 20th, 2019. Stillborn calf. This will be the last. I am too weak to continue. Forgive me. Sarah's flashlight flickered. The battery was dying. In the stuttering light, the jars seemed to shift and move, their contents pressing against the glass. She ran. Up the stairs, slamming the basement door behind her, throwing the bolt. She stood in the kitchen, gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs. What the fuck had her grandmother been doing? Creating some kind of collection, preserving specimens like a demented biologist? And for what purpose? The journal mentioned feedings, mentioned keeping it satisfied. Sarah ran to the sink and vomited. When she could breathe again, she knew she had to leave. She would go back to Chicago tonight, contact the authorities in the morning, let them deal with this nightmare. There was obviously something very wrong here, something illegal. Her grandmother had been disturbed, mentally ill perhaps, and this whole property was a crime scene. She grabbed her bag from upstairs and ran for the front door. It wouldn't open. Sarah pulled and twisted the knob, but the door was stuck fast. She tried the back door. The same. The windows were old, painted shut for years. She could break one, but the porch was covered with debris and she stopped. Through the window, she could see that the sun was setting. While she'd been in the basement, hours had passed, though it had felt like only minutes. Night was coming, and in the growing darkness, the cornfield was beginning to rustle, though there was no wind. Sarah tried her cell phone again. Still no signal. She checked every door, every window. The house was sealed tight, as if it had locked itself. As darkness fell completely, she heard it begin. The rustling in the corn grew louder, more agitated. It sounded like thousands of stalks moving at once, bending and breaking. Something was moving through the field, something large, approaching the house. Sarah blew out all the candles and lamps, plunging the house into darkness. She crouched beneath the kitchen window and peeked out. The moonlight illuminated the backyard and the edge of the cornfield. As she watched, the corn stalks began to part, pushed aside by something moving through them. The figure emerged. It was the same thing she'd seen the night before, but clearer now. It stood at least 8 feet tall, vaguely humanoid in shape but wrong in every detail. Its body was impossibly thin, like a skeleton wrapped in dark leather. Its arms were too long, hanging past where its knees would be, and it had no face, just a smooth, dark oval where a head should be, though Sarah had the unmistakable sensation that it was looking directly at the house, directly at her. It began to move toward the house with that same strange motion she'd seen before, not walking, but appearing a few feet closer every few seconds, like frames skipping in a film. Sarah ducked down, her breath coming in short gasps. She heard the back door try to open, the knob rattling violently. When that didn't work, there was a heavy thud against the door, as if something massive had thrown itself against it. Then silence. Sarah waited, listening. Was it gone? A scratching sound came from above her, from the roof. It was on the house. Sarah heard it moving across the roof, its weight making the old boards creak and groan. It went to one of the upstairs windows. She heard glass breaking. It was inside. Sarah's mind raced. The basement. She could hide in the basement. Whatever that thing was, maybe it wouldn't follow her down there, into Eleanor's workshop. She crawled across the kitchen floor and opened the basement door as quietly as she could. Behind her, she heard footsteps on the second floor, moving through the bedrooms, searching. Sarah descended into the darkness, pulling the door closed behind her and throwing the bolt. She moved carefully down the stairs without a light, using the railing to guide her. At the bottom, she crouched behind the workbench, making herself as small as possible. Above her, the footsteps moved methodically through the first floor. The thing knew she was here somewhere. It was hunting her. The footsteps stopped outside the basement door. Sarah held her breath. In the darkness, surrounded by the jars and their preserved horrors, she waited. The door rattled, the bolt held. Then she heard a voice, or something approximating a voice. It was like a whisper amplified, coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. Keeper. Where is the keeper? Sarah's blood ran cold. Keeper, the offering. Where is the offering? It wasn't asking, it was demanding. This was what Eleanor had been dealing with for 70 years. This thing, whatever it was, expected to be fed. The monthly offerings in the jars, Eleanor had been feeding it. No, keeper, no, offering. The agreement is broken. The basement door exploded inward, the bolt tearing free from the wood. The thing appeared at the top of the stairs, silhouetted against the dim light from upstairs, impossibly tall and thin. It began to descend. Sarah scrambled backward, knocking over jars. They shattered on the concrete floor, spilling their contents in a wave of fluid and preserved flesh. Her back hit the far wall. There was nowhere else to go. The thing reached the bottom of the stairs. Up close, it was even more horrifying. Its skin, if it could be called skin, seemed to shift and writhe like it was made of shadows. Its face was a void, but Sarah could feel its attention fixed on her like a physical weight. It reached out one impossibly long arm toward her. "Wait," Sarah screamed. "I can give you an offering. I can continue the agreement." The thing paused, its hand inches from her face. "I'm the new keeper," Sarah babbled, desperate. "Eleanor's dead, but I'm her granddaughter. I inherited everything. The house, the land, the responsibility. Just tell me what you need. I'll do it." The thing tilted its head, considering. When it spoke again, its voice seemed to come from inside Sarah's own head. "You will feed me." Yes, I'll feed you, whatever you need. Every moon you will provide." "Okay, yes, every month, I understand. Fresh, flesh, living, then dead." Sarah's stomach lurched, but she nodded. "I'll find animals. I'll preserve them like Eleanor did. Living, then dead, killed for me. Yes." The thing withdrew its hand. It stood there for a long moment, studying her with its faceless gaze. Then it spoke again. "If you fail, I will take you. If you run, I will find you. You are the keeper. Now this is your purpose." "I understand." The thing turned and moved back up the stairs with unnatural fluidity. Sarah heard it leave through the broken window. After a long time, the house fell silent. Sarah didn't leave the basement until dawn. When she finally climbed the stairs on shaking legs, the first floor was empty. The broken window upstairs let in cold morning air. She knew she should run, get in her car and drive back to Chicago and never look back. But the thing's words echoed in her head. "If you run, I will find you." Something told her it wasn't bluffing. Over the next few days, Sarah fell into a numb routine. She boarded up the broken window. She cleaned up the broken jars in the basement, though the smell never fully went away. She read Eleanor's journals cover to cover, learning the details of the agreement. The thing had come in 1952, though Eleanor never explained from where or why. It had killed her parents before Eleanor figured out what it wanted. Regular offerings, sacrifices of flesh. In exchange, it would stay in the cornfield and not harm the keeper or the nearby town. Eleanor had maintained this arrangement for nearly 70 years. Now it was Sarah's turn. The first full moon came 3 weeks after Sarah's encounter with the thing. She drove to a farm an hour away and bought a piglet, telling the farmer she was starting a homestead. Back at the farmhouse, she brought the piglet down to the basement. She cried as she did what needed to be done. The surgical tools were sharp. She tried to make it quick. Afterward, she preserved the body in formaldehyde, just like Eleanor had, and labeled the jar with the date. That night, she carried the jar to the edge of the cornfield and left it there. In the morning, it was gone. The months passed. Sarah quit her job in Chicago and moved to the farmhouse permanently. What choice did she have? She couldn't leave, couldn't escape. She was the keeper now. She became a ghost in Wickham, appearing once a month for supplies, saying nothing, making no friends. The townspeople understood. They'd watched Eleanor do the same thing for decades. They knew the price of living on that land. Sarah's life became a cycle of waiting and dreading the full moon. Each month she acquired another subject. Rabbits, chickens, cats from the shelter, dogs from farms where they had too many puppies. She told herself she was doing what was necessary. She told herself she had no choice. But late at night, alone in the farmhouse, Sarah wondered if there was more to it. The thing had said the agreement was old, and Eleanor's journals hinted at something deeper. What if the Matthews family had made this bargain willingly once, long ago? What if they had invited this thing, bound it to the land in exchange for something? Fertile fields, good harvests, prosperity. What if Sarah was just the latest in a long line of keepers stretching back generations? She stopped asking questions. She stopped looking for escape. The farmhouse became her prison and her purpose. Years passed in a blur of isolation and monthly rituals. Sarah aged faster than she should have. The stress, the horror, the terrible knowledge of what she had to do each month. It all took its toll. Her hair began to grey. Lines appeared on her face. She rarely looked in mirrors anymore. The townspeople of Wickham watched from a distance, just as they had watched Eleanor. They saw Sarah making her monthly trips to town, her eyes growing more hollow, her movements more mechanical. They knew the signs, another keeper caught in the cycle. Some of the younger people in town, those who hadn't been alive during Eleanor's time, didn't understand. They asked questions. Why did that woman live alone out there? Why did she look so haunted? But the older residents, the ones who remembered, they kept their mouths shut. They knew better than to interfere. Roy, the old man from the diner, passed away in his sleep one winter night. At his funeral, he was buried in the small cemetery behind the church. Sarah watched from her car, parked at a distance. She didn't attend the service, but she felt compelled to be there somehow. Roy had tried to warn her. He'd been one of the few honest enough to speak the truth, even if she hadn't listened. Linda, the diner owner, saw Sarah's car and walked over after the service. Sarah rolled down her window. "You're looking thin," Linda said, her voice kind but her eyes sad. "You eating enough?" "I'm fine," Sarah replied, though they both knew it was a lie. Linda handed her a paper bag. Sandwiches and some pie. Jack made extra. "Thank you." Linda hesitated, then said, "You know, if you ever need to talk." "I don't," Sarah said quickly, "but thank you." Linda nodded, understanding. She'd made the same offer to Eleanor over the years and received the same response. Some burdens couldn't be shared. As Linda walked away, Sarah looked at the cemetery, at the rows of headstones marking the dead of Wickham. How many of them had died because of the thing in the cornfield? How many accidents and heart attacks and mysterious disappearances had it been responsible for before Eleanor made her bargain? And how many people had Sarah saved by continuing that bargain? It was a thought she clung to in the darkest moments. She was a keeper, yes, but she was also a guardian. The thing stayed in the corn because she fed it. It didn't wander into town. It didn't hunt the innocent. The price she paid, the terrible things she did each month, they kept others safe. Or so she told herself. The truth was, Sarah didn't know if that was true. She didn't know if the thing would actually rampage through Wickham if she stopped feeding it, or if it would simply find another keeper, another victim to trap in this cycle. Eleanor's journals didn't provide those answers. They only documented the agreement, not its origins or its ultimate purpose. By 2024, 5 years after inheriting the farmhouse, Sarah had aged beyond her years. At 33, she looked 50. Her hands shook constantly. She had nightmares every night when she could sleep at all. The basement had become her domain, filled with hundreds more jars, each one a testament to her terrible work. She had become what Eleanor was: isolated, haunted, trapped. In the spring of that year, Sarah felt the first signs of illness: a persistent cough, weight loss she couldn't afford, pain in her chest. She ignored it at first, but as the weeks passed, it became impossible to deny. Something was seriously wrong. She made an appointment at a clinic in Cedar Rapids, telling herself she'd go, get checked out, get medicine if needed. But the night before the appointment, she stood at the window of the farmhouse, looking out at the cornfield, and she knew. She wouldn't leave. She couldn't. The thing wouldn't allow it. And even if it did, what would be the point? Her life was here now. Her purpose was here. Sarah cancelled the appointment. The illness progressed quickly. By summer, she could barely climb the stairs. By fall, she was spending most of her time in bed. The monthly feedings became increasingly difficult. She could barely drive, barely had the strength to do what needed to be done in the basement. In October, 5 years to the day after she'd first arrived at the farmhouse, Sarah knew she was dying. She lay in the same bed Eleanor had prepared for her, looking at the same ceiling Eleanor must have looked at in her final days. The cycle was repeating. Another keeper dying, another inheritance waiting to trap another victim. Sarah had made sure of it. She'd contacted Harold Finch months ago, when she'd first realized she was sick. She'd updated her will. Everything would go to her only living relative, a cousin she'd tracked down through ancestry websites. Emma, a young woman in her 20s, living in Minnesota, completely unaware of what was waiting for her. Sarah felt guilty about it, but what choice did she have? The thing needed a keeper. If there was no keeper, If the agreement truly broke, she didn't want to think about what might happen. On her last night, Sarah heard the corn rustling outside. She was too weak to get out of bed, too weak to even turn her head. But she knew the thing was there, waiting. It had never come into the house except that one night, when it had chased her to the basement. It had never needed to. Sarah had fulfilled the agreement faithfully for 5 years, just as Eleanor had for 70. But now, as Sarah's breathing grew shallow and her vision dimmed, she wondered if it would take her. If, in the end, the keepers themselves became offerings. The bedroom door opened, though there was no wind. Sarah heard the footsteps she remembered from that first terrible night. Slow, heavy, deliberate. The thing appeared at the foot of her bed. Tall, impossibly thin, faceless. It stood there, regarding her chaussure with its void of a face. Sarah tried to speak, but no words came. She had so many questions. What are you? Where did you come from? Why us? Why the Matthews family? But the thing didn't answer. It simply stood there, waiting. Sarah Matthews died at 3:47 in the morning, alone except for the thing in the cornfield. Her last thought was a prayer that Emma would be smarter than she had been, that Emma would find a way to break the cycle. But deep down, Sarah knew the truth. There was no breaking this cycle. There was only the agreement, the feedings, and the endless succession of keepers. The farmhouse would claim another victim. The corn would continue to grow. And the thing would wait, patient and eternal, for the next keeper to arrive. 2 weeks later, Emma received a letter from Harold Finch. Her cousin Sarah, whom she'd never met, had passed away. Emma was the sole heir to her estate, a farmhouse in rural Iowa, a small savings account, and all the property's contents. Emma stared at the letter, considering she'd just lost her job. Her rent was overdue. The timing seemed almost too perfect. She called the number on the letterhead. Harold Finch answered, his voice tired and sad. Yes, Miss Emma, I can meet you at the property next week to transfer ownership. It's a bit isolated, but the house is, well, it's yours if you want it. Emma made the appointment. She had no idea what waited for her in Iowa. No idea about the basement, the jars, the thing in the cornfield. No idea that she was about to become the next link in a chain stretching back decades, perhaps centuries. On a cold October evening, Emma drove down a gravel driveway lined with dried corn stalks. Approaching a farmhouse the color of old bones, Harold Finch was waiting for her. A briefcase in hand, clearly anxious to complete the transaction and leave before dark. As Emma got out of her car and looked at the farmhouse, at the sagging porch and the peeling barn, and the endless field of corn swaying in the wind, she felt a flutter of unease in her stomach. But she dismissed it. It was just an old house. Just property, just an unexpected inheritance that would change her life. She had no idea how right she was. Harold handed her the keys and the papers to sign. He explained the basics, the generator out back, the well water, the nearest town. He moved quickly, efficiently, desperate to be gone. Is there anything else I should know? Emma asked as Harold packed up his briefcase. He paused, and for a moment Emma saw something in his eyes. Pity, maybe, or guilt. Your cousin lived here alone for 5 years, he said carefully. Before that, it was your great-grandmother. The property has been in your family for a long time. Why did they stay here? It's so isolated. Harold looked at the cornfield, then back at Emma. Some places, Miss Emma, they have a way of keeping people. Just be careful. And if you see anything strange, anything at all. Yes? But Harold shook his head. Good luck, was all he said. Then he was gone, his car disappearing down the long driveway, leaving Emma alone with the farmhouse and the corn and the thing waiting patiently for its new keeper. That night, after Emma had explored the house and found the bedroom prepared with fresh linens and dead flowers in a vase, after she'd lit candles against the darkness and tried her phone only to find no signal, she stood at the upstairs window and looked out at the cornfield. The moon was nearly full. The corn swayed in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. And there, about 50 yards from the house, barely visible among the stalks, was a figure. Emma blinked, trying to focus. It was probably just a scarecrow. Just shadows playing tricks. But then it moved. It didn't walk. It simply appeared 5 yards closer. Emma gasped and stepped back from the window, her heart beginning to race. This was impossible. She was seeing things. Stress from the long drive, the unfamiliar surroundings, her imagination running wild. She forced herself to look again. The figure was even closer now. Impossibly tall, dark like a void, faceless, and it was looking directly at her window. The cycle continued. It always did. The farmhouse had its new keeper. The agreement would be maintained. The corn would grow. And somewhere in the basement, hundreds of jars waited on shelves, with room for hundreds more. In Wickham, 12 miles away, Linda stood at the window of her darkened diner, looking toward the Matthews farm, though it was too far away to see. Jack came up behind her, putting a hand on her shoulder. "Another one?" he asked quietly. Linda nodded. Harold called. The granddaughter arrived today. Did he warn her? He tried. They never listen. They never understand until it's too late. Jack sighed. How many has it been now? How many keepers? I don't know. Eleanor was here before we were born, and there were others before her, going back to when the town was first settled. Why don't we do something? Tell the authorities, bring in the church, something. Linda turned to look at her husband. And tell them what exactly? That there's a monster in the cornfield that demands monthly sacrifices? They'd lock us up. And even if they believed us, what could they do? Others have tried to stop it. Remember what happened to Reverend Marsh back in the 50s, or those paranormal investigators in the 90s? Jack remembered. The stories were part of Wickham's dark history, passed down in whispers. Everyone who tried to interfere with the agreement ended up dead or disappeared. So we just let it continue, Jack said bitterly. Another young woman trapped, forced to do terrible things, slowly dying from the stress until it claims her and moves on to the next victim. We don't have a choice. The thing in the cornfield, whatever it is, it was here before the town. It'll be here after. All we can do is stay away from the Matthews property and pray that the keepers remain strong enough to maintain the agreement. It's not right. No, Linda agreed. It's not. But it's how things are. They stood together in the darkness, looking toward the farmhouse they couldn't see, thinking about the young woman who had just arrived, who would soon discover the terrible truth about her inheritance. In the farmhouse, Emma had retreated to her bedroom, pushing the dresser against the door, just as Sarah had done 5 years before, just as Eleanor had done countless times over 70 years. She sat on the bed, clutching a candlestick, listening to the sounds of the old house. And outside in the cornfield, the thing waited, patient, eternal, hungry. It had fed for decades on the offerings provided by the keepers. It had grown strong, grown comfortable. It knew the cycle would continue. Another keeper had arrived. The agreement would be explained through terror and confrontation. The new keeper would learn what was required, and she would serve, just as all the others had served. The corn rustled in the windless night, sounding almost like laughter. In the darkness, something moved between the stalks, circling the farmhouse, claiming its territory, asserting its dominance. The farmhouse stood silent and still, a prison and a temple, waiting to transform another innocent victim into a keeper of terrible secrets. And in the basement, in the darkness, hundreds of jars caught the faint moonlight filtering through the high windows, their contents pressing against the glass as if listening, as if waiting to welcome the new additions that would inevitably join them. The cycle continued. It always did. The keepers came and went, their lives consumed by the agreement, their souls worn away by the monthly horrors they were forced to commit. But the thing in the cornfield remained, unchanging, eternal, feeding on the offerings and the fear and the slow spiritual death of those who served it. This was the legacy of the Matthews farmhouse. This was the curse that passed from generation to generation, an inheritance of horror that could not be refused, could not be escaped. Emma would learn this soon enough. In the coming days, she would find the journal, discover the basement, encounter the thing. She would make the same choices Sarah made and Eleanor before her, because there were no other choices to make. She would become a keeper, she would serve, and eventually she would die, passing the burden to whoever came next. The farmhouse would endure, the corn would grow, and the thing would wait, patient and hungry, forever satisfied as long as the agreement was maintained, as long as the keepers continued their terrible work. This was the way it had always been. This was the way it would always be. Generation after generation, keeper after keeper, sacrifice after sacrifice. In the cornfield outside of Wickham, Iowa, something ancient and evil had found a home, and it would never let go.